Welcome to Malcolm and We, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com, a streaming network heard around the world and beyond. I'm Malcolm Berman, your host, and my co-host is Yana Larson. And Yana, introduce our guest.
Yes. Today we have Michael Wayne, and he is a filmmaker, acupuncturist, and advocate for systemic change. He is the director of the feature-length documentary, How to Save Democracy, a powerful and timely film that explores the forces threatening democratic institutions and the people working to protect them. Driven by a lifelong commitment to truth and social justice, Michael brings together a wide range of voices to examine how democracy can be renewed from the ground up. His work combines a clear eyed analysis of political and economic systems with a deep belief in grassroots action and civic engagement. Based in Saratoga Springs, New York, Michael is currently focused on building partnerships with organizations, colleges, and activist networks to bring How to Save Democracy to communities around the country. Thank you for being here, Michael. And
Oh,
I wondered, so like I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Kent, Ohio, and UUs are very much about social justice. So could I suggest to someone, the powers that be at the church, that it would be great if they could see how to show how to save democracy at the church in our community? Is that how one would do it?
there's a few ways that the personal asking, since you know the people at the church and you're a member, are on the website for the film, which is savingdemocracyfilm.com. There's a page that called Host a Screening where someone can type in a screening request. Um, but yeah, we can just personally talk, Yana, message each other. In fact,
Okay.
where I live in Saratoga Springs, New York, I've had two showings so far. I'm having one more showing at the local Unitarian Universalist church. So it's definitely something, that fits in with the mission of the Unitarian Universalists.
It does. And the reason I asked is because I wanted people to think about that. And especially with the way things are, that I would think there'd be a lot of local organizations that would want to know how they could host that. So that's one way we can really get it out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Have you contacted any of the like CNN or MSNBC, the Rachel Maddow show, or to be interviewed on there? Because that seems to be the motto of the week or the year: save democracy, because they're
Yeah,
being
no,
killed.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good idea, Malcolm. I just finished the film in February and then finishing it, then I was just putting a few things in order and starting to work out distribution. And I'm just slowly rolling out. I had a couple showings in my area and now working on trying to get out further, through grassroots. And yeah, it's you make good suggestions on contacting.
How long is the documentary?
It's 116 minutes. So it's
About 2 hours.
yeah, it's full length.
When did
It's
you start working on it?
uh l- so here's the genesis of it. The beginning of last year, the seed came to my mind that I wanted to do this. I didn't know what the deal with the election was. I actually believed Donald Trump was going to lose, but I knew that democracy had many issues. I'd been writing about it, studying it. And so in April, about a year ago, I began a series of interviews that lasted from April through August. I interviewed 15 different people. Um, Experts, really, really solid people. Some of them won Pulitzer Prize for their work. And then in September began the editing process. And then I slowed down around the election because I wanted to see how the election would turn out, to see how I would frame the film. And like many people, the election was a shock.
Mhm.
And so then I finished it up in February, just final touches to it.
Wow. Now, um, we didn't really have in your bio your background, but um, tell about that.
Um, well, yeah, the short bio you read that I wear a few hats. I'm an
Yeah,
acupuncturist. Uh,
right.
I'm a writer. I've written 5 books, and then a filmmaker. I've made a few films and short series, and I had an interview series. But everything is kind of very mission driven about creating a society that works for all, a more just society, a more fair society, a more egalitarian society. And I've really, through a lot of research and understanding and writing, I've come to understand what it would take. And in the United States, we're the exact opposite of that type of society,
Mm.
and it's really
Right
come
now, you mean, or
uh,
in general?
in general, probably since the beginning of the country, and that's one of the things in my film. It's kind of epic in that I go through the history of the United States from the beginning, kind of a brief survey to show, and a couple of people interviewed say the same thing, that the problems with democracy in the US predate Donald Trump and will continue long after he's gone from the scene. And so even though those of us of right minds, righteous minds, are very upset and protesting or doing what we can, it's important to understand that this problem didn't just arise on January 20th or when Trump came down the golden escalator. It's been in the making for quite a while. And unless we start facing it and learning what it takes and what it is we're looking for, it'll just continue. The United States has been rated a flawed democracy for 10, 15 years now, by the Democracy Index, which rates all the democracies of the world. And so that's not a good rating for a country.
No, I remember sociology classes that, if you say art, like after taking sociology classes, and if you're somewhere in a group and you say, well, that America, we don't have a true democracy. Some people get really, really upset about that, but it is true. We don't have a true
It's not. It's a
democracy.
representative republic.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And,
Well,
and I've also heard that because I'm really trying to pay a lot attention to a lot of sources, that this whole like idea of the I don't know what it would have been called, but the Project 2025 was started back like around the 30s. This whole concept. Have you heard that in your interviews?
well, it's a thread that goes back a long time. You can trace it to the slavery days, because there's been
Yeah.
this ransom thread that's been in this country from the early days that has always wanted to turn the clock back, and whether it was make the United States back into a monarchy or keep slaves, and then after the Civil War, not allow, have Jim Crow laws that didn't allow black people who were no longer slaves to live freely. And then it just kept going. And then you had the bankers and the oligarchs in the 19th century and 20th century who wanted control and didn't like being taxed. So it's a thread that just keeps
Mm.
going.
Well, I have a question, which I
Yeah.
know. Is there another country as large as the United States, have as many diversified peoples
Hmm.
that is a democracy? Is it possible to have a democracy with the mass population that we have that's a little bit of everything?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Malcolm. People bring that up because, yeah, the United States is the third largest populated country, China, then India, or India, China, and it's one of well, India is a democracy, China is not, um, and so, but India has a far different system than we have, um, a caste system, which doesn't always allow for diversity. And some of the other democracies in the world are a little more homogenous. Um, the Nordic countries, though Western Europe is fairly diverse as immigrants have come from different countries. But people will say, and to answer your question, Malcolm, some critics of democracy or European style democracy will say, well, that may work in those countries because they're smaller or they're more homogenous. The United States is diverse, it's bigger. But I don't think that holds true. The United States is the richest country in the world. So we have more diversity. We can celebrate the diversity and we can scale up. So these countries are smaller and it may work for them. And so we just scale it up and it can work for us. There's nothing that says that just because we have more diverse voices, democracy can't work.
So is it the idea of that once you set up districts and then you gerrymander it, is that where it all fell apart?
Um, a number of ways. I think, and you're right, Yana, that's part of it. I think it all started when in the 1970s and 1980, when we went from the politics of the New Deal and the landscape of the New Deal, which created a more just society, to more the trickle down economics and more less government and more libertarian and less regulations and less taxes. And so then wealth inequality became um, more and more a big crack in the system because of the divergence in wealthy.
Wasn't it already though with wealth and
Well, from the 1930s, when Roosevelt instituted the New Deal, through the 1970s was a period of fairly equal well, I mean, there were different levels of wealth from the wealthy to the working class, but each class of people prospered. CEO pay, like income inequality, didn't really exist. CEO pay to average worker pay was fairly low. I think it was 15 times the average worker's salary to the CEO. Now it's, I think, 350 times. So it was and that was because of the higher tax levels then, but things
mm,
changed with when Reagan came in. So that was the beginning, more libertarian approaches, and um, and then there was just more money flooding into politics, and then the breaking point, full breaking point, happened in 2010 when the Supreme Court ruled on the Citizens United.
Yeah, to me, Citizens United was the
Yeah. So there were three things that happened a couple of years apart, beginning in 2010. In 2010, Citizen United, which unleashed floods of money, mostly dark money, into the political system. Then in 2010, the Republicans dreamt up the whole radical gerrymandering, which you mentioned, Yana, and they took over state legislatures and drew up district lines and radically gerrymandered states so that in states that were fairly even, like Ohio and North Carolina and Wisconsin, fairly even in the electorate, Democrat, Republican, they gerrymandered so much that even when the election, the electorate voted fairly 50-50 or just a little different than that, the Republicans would win like 75% of the seats. So that was the second one. And then the third one in 2013 was another Supreme Court ruling that the Voting Rights Act that Lyndon Johnson signed in 1965, that finally ended Jim Crow laws and allowed minorities to vote without having to show ID, without having to pay poll tax, without literacy taxes, literacy tests, anything that got changed, taken away. And there was a section of the Voting Rights Act that said that anytime a state wanted to change their voter registration, they would have to get clearance from the federal government. So the Supreme Court in 2013 took away what was called pre-clearance, that the federal government had a say in any state that wanted to change their voting, how people could vote, which gave the states the right to start suppressing votes. So you had a lot of people were shut out from voting, and it still goes on. So that triple header really put the Republicans much more in control of the voting, and started giving them more majorities. And it started in 2012 in the national election, congressional election, in 2012 when Republicans took back control of the House, and things have been a shit show since.
Yeah,
What,
it's
sorry, Malcolm, go
there you
ahead.
go.
I was just going to ask, how how much of a factor really is the whole electoral college idea?
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Some of these things are baked into the U.S. Constitution, which really brings what is called the tyranny of the minority. It leads to minoritarian rule, so that a minority of the people, as has happened, a few times in this country, twice in the 21st century, when a majority of people vote for a president, but that person does not become president because of the Electoral College. So
Right.
that's
And did that not happen this time too with Trump? Didn't Harris actually?
no, it was a
Am I
very
wrong?
close. It was
That
one of
was
the
very close. I think he won the popular vote by about 1 million or so.
Yeah, it was one of the closest presidential elections in American history.
But
Um,
but
And
but to
there
me,
wasn't a landslide.
what seems to be, yeah, unfair and not equal is that you have a state like California that has
mhm,
2 senators and has so many million people, or a state like New York who has 2 senators. Now
mhm.
you have states like North Carolina or South Carolina, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, that all those states combined do not have the population of California. Yet,
Yeah.
they're represented by 8 senators,
Uh-huh.
or 10 senators, where we have two.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another big problem when two Dakotas with probably 1 million population or a little more, California with 40 million,
Right.
and
Yeah,
Dakotas have more say in the Senate than California. It's
yeah. I mean,
Well, there are a whole lot of messes. How are we going to save it?
well, that's the big question, because there's so many things that are baked in structurally that are problematic, and that's why my film, about half the film, looks at the problems and addresses how we got here, and the second half then looks at the solutions, the political solutions, the economic solutions, the solutions of movements and activism. So I think right now we're seeing that uprising, and it's really important. It's really important for people to continue to uprise. And one of the things also in my film, because I do this sweep through history, and one of the eras I focus on a lot is the when Franklin Roosevelt was president, and I have 4 different speeches that Roosevelt gave, because he really stood up to the financial interests of this country, who were 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 unified against him. And he gave a famous speech in 1936, right before the election, his reelection, and where he spoke about the banking and financial interests, and he said government by organized money is no different than government by organized crime. And he said never before have a class of people risen up against hated someone so much, and he said I welcome their hatred. So we need leaders who are willing to stand up against the financial class. We need the bottom up movement of people, and we need people to understand this again, Donald Trump didn't create this anti-democratic nation, and it has to be turned around, whether it's rewriting the Constitution, it's changing things like these things that are baked in structurally, like what you were talking about, Malcolm, the way the makeup of the Senate or the Electoral College, things like the filibuster. There's so many things, and then the gerrymandering, the Citizens United, the Voting Rights Act. Um, Probably Trump wouldn't even have won the electoral vote if not for the Supreme Court's ruling on the Voting Rights Act, because many people couldn't vote. And we've seen over the last few presidential elections the long lines, Or like in Georgia, they made it illegal for people to have water, be given water.
Right.
That's a part of that Voting Rights Act that got turned around. So states can just do whatever they want. They don't have to get approval from the federal government to change the ability for people to vote.
But the whole attitude of this country has changed with Donald Trump.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what he is doing is sort of like an antithesis of what America had normally stood for.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
and to me, it's still I don't know why people have acquiesced to him.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and I think history will not look kindly on this period. I've kind of said, oh, maybe after Trump is gone, maybe there'll be some sort of Nuremberg style trials for the people who've aided and abetted and been complicit. Because the cruelty is just through the roof.
And
But
there's probably so much that we don't know that's happening, like just how many people have been deported to, that prison. And, there's what we know about, but there's a lot we don't know about, which is
uh
scary.
yeah, 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 and it's sad that all the people who just follow along. I went to one of the protests on Saturday in my area, and I had a sign that said "Wanted, a real democracy." And after demonstration was over, I was walking. My wife was with me. We were walking back to our car, and some big truck comes barreling by. He sees my sign. I'm just walking, and he can see my sign. He says, "We already got a democracy here." And he just does. He thinks, I couldn't even tell you what goes through someone like that's mind, but they probably think, oh, we're getting rid of all those people who came into this country illegally and are ruining it, and just all these
Well,
all these.
Well,
so uh, obviously we all have a hope that we can save democracy, but in your dark moments, have you allowed yourself to think ahead to how might things look at this time next year? Because I know I ask that of a lot of people who I have conversations with, and I try to not get into conversations unless I know that I'm talking with somebody who's, sees things the way I do. But what have you heard?
Well, I try not to future think too far ahead, but and I hope things don't get, rock bottom. But sometimes things have to hit a certain bottom, wherever that might be, for people to realize, there is a better way. And that's what I hope my film will show people, because, I talk
Yeah,
about the
we want to
political
get that
stuff, I
out.
talk about the economics things that can change. And there's so many factors that got us where we are, from the wealth inequality on the economic scale to the gerrymandering and the Supreme Court's evisceration of Voting Rights Act and Citizen United, all those things combined. But there's hope that we can change things. There's something called, and I bring it up in my film, something called the 3.5% rule, that when 3.5% of a population mobilizes in nonviolent action, things change around. And we're going to get there. And
I
and
heard from uh, someone, I think it was a news report, that economist kind of thing, like that when it gets close to school starting and moms are trying to go to the store to buy school supplies for the kids, and they find that they can't get everything because of the whole, the cost of everything and the tariffs or whatever. I think that's what they were referring to, that the women who thought, oh, Trump is great, are going to, the eggs, the discussion about eggs is out the window now. But if it comes to when school starts up again, that will maybe be a wake up call for some households. Have you heard that?
Well, I think part of it's going to be if the prices from produce and different
Basic
manufactured
things.
things go
Yeah.
way up, and
Mhm.
aside from getting way up, we may not be able to get them.
Mhm.
Right. Like how much are sneakers going to cost?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, here's a going back in history again. In the 1920s, it was a very prosperous time in the United States, the Roaring Twenties, for a certain class of people, the wealthy. The stock market was going wild, lots of money was being made. Then it all came tumbling down when just the financial world got over the top and gambled too much, crashed the stock market, crashed the economy. Republicans were in control all throughout the 20s, and one of the richest men in the world was the Treasury Secretary at that point, Andrew Mellon. And so things were very bleak. But that was 1929 when the stock market crashed. But the Republicans, Herbert Hoover was the president, and he stayed president through the end of 1932, actually March of 1933. That was Inauguration Day. But he would not do anything to help people because he believed if you give people money, if government starts giving handouts, people will not know how to work. So that turned people strongly against Republicans, and it led to Franklin Roosevelt's election, large scale election victory in 1932, and he instituted sweeping changes that really left a mark for 40 years. And each of his subsequent election victories were landslides. And so, people, that's where you don't want to see things hit rock bottom for people to realize, like talking about prices or people, really being hurt. But one way or another, people need to wake up, and you need political leaders who run for office who recognize this and talk about this and don't aren't beholden to the wealthy and afraid to speak out against the wealthy. That's where like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been doing this fighting oligarchy tour all around the country, and they're getting large crowds, people,
Yeah.
and they're really exciting people because they're some of the few speaking this language that we can't keep having a government of the billionaires. It has to be a government of the
But
people.
I'm a little worried about that because they are becoming sort of almost like the leaders of the Democratic Party. But I don't think because of their, really far left views that they are electable. That's a problem.
Well, they are. Bernie Sanders has been elected many times in
Yeah,
Vermont.
but in a small state.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Well, I
talking
don't know
about
if
on a
Bernie.
national election that to head the party. Like
Yeah, Bernie. Yeah, yeah,
I think like Cory Booker was might be able to come out in front. Yeah.
yeah.
No, but Malcolm, it's what they're saying. That's what's they're not so much out on an election tour as much as they're trying to wake people up. That's the way I've been taking it.
Yeah, they're putting a message out there and trying to mobilize people and also help other political leaders to understand. And there are other political leaders, primarily Democrats, who are also recognizing this and speaking out. Chris Murphy from
Another
Connecticut.
thing, are the Democrats doing a good job?
Well, like the Republicans, for years they were beholden to Wall Street, the wealth class, and it came back to bite them. The working class turned against them, and in 2000, and in my film, I traced this how in the financial crash, housing crash of 2008, when bankers got bailed out, no bankers went to jail. Millions, tens of millions of people were ruined, lost their homes. Um, and Trump came along and spoke to that pain people were having and the anger against government. And he portrayed Hillary Clinton as as someone friendly to Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. And he made the election close. We'll argue Hillary Clinton won the election because she won the popular vote. But the election should never have been close. But people were angry, and they're still angry. And Trump, I mean, give it to him. He's a con.
The thing that really gets me upset, and I don't know how we could change it, is we vote people as individuals. They run in the individual elections, the state elections or the national elections, the senators or the House of Representatives. But when they get into office, they don't vote as individuals, they vote as blocks. They vote
Mhm.
as Republicans or they vote as Democrats. I know personally, I vary depending on the issue.
Mhm.
I mean, one time I'm to the right, one time I'm to the left. Like
Mhm.
Never
socially,
been
I'm a
to the right,
liberal.
ever, ever, ever.
Socially, I'm a liberal. Economically, I'm a conservative. But
Uh-huh.
there's no people like that. They either vote in one way, as again, it's that blocked voting.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden they become robots.
Yeah. Well, that's another flaw in the American political system that we just have two parties. You look at European or other democracies, and it's multi-party,
Yeah,
usually
Mhm.
parliamentary. Some have president and prime minister. But when you have multi-parties, you can have people representing different interests. They'll sit in the parliament all together, have to compromise, and often the ruling party is a coalition government of maybe the Social Democrats, the center
right. That's
Greens, and so different perspectives all get incorporated into the government.
yeah. Michael, I hate to cut you off, but our time has come up. If you heard my little beeper, is there any way, can people see your documentary on the internet, or is it on there yet?
It is not fully gone full public. They can see the trailer and at savingdemocracyfilm.com. And on that website too, you can sign up to be on the email list to learn when you can see it. As I said, I'm in the early stages of distribution, just had a local showings. Going to go further. It may end up on streaming platforms in the future. But yeah.
Well,
So
would you come back? Because
yeah,
it would
anytime you'll track, you know how to
have
get me.
time go by and give
Right. I'd love to see if there's a way that we could eventually get your documentary on MalcolmPresents.com.
Yeah, yeah, it's 2 hours, so we'd have to figure
Yeah,
that out.
what we would have to do is do a separate channel for you. It's sort of like where you go to MalcolmPresents.com, like I have like 5, 6 shows on now,
Uh-huh.
and then you just go to Saving Democracy, and that's specialized with you.
Yeah. Well, there are ways that I will have the film shown virtually. There's a platform that allows people to view the film virtually, but I haven't set it up there either. But yeah, I'm hoping to get the film in as many eyes as possible.
Yeah, because I think it's so necessary at this stage,
Uh,
and it's frightening out there because every day is different. Every hour is different.
yeah, it's a thrill a minute.
I mean, listen
did
to
you
the
go
stock
through
market.
a real slump when, January 20th and everything? Because I know a lot of us were just like, we couldn't even.
Mhm.
Did that happen to you, or you're just like, oh, I know about this and so on.
Oh
Oh,
no, oh no. I had a
I
few
can write
restless
my paper
weeks.
this.
Yeah, I had a few.
Anyway, Michael,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you,
Pleasure
Rob.
having you, and we'll be in
Yeah,
contact to get you on again.
yeah, anytime.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And
thank
you've
you.
been listening to MalcolmPresents.com, and Malcolm and We is a specific show. Anyway, we'll see you next week. Bye.
All right.
Michael.
Oh, ciao.